My name is Gloria, and I'm 62 years old. For 13 long years, I watched my son slip away from me, poisoned against his own mother by a woman who saw me as beneath her family's standards. I built a cleaning supply empire from nothing, working 70-hour weeks in my garage, all while my daughter-in-law convinced my only child that I didn't want to see him or my grandchildren. Then everything changed the day I sold my company for $38 million. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt excluded from your own family. And don't forget to subscribe because you won't believe what happened when she showed up at my door demanding to move into my new mansion. Trust me, the ending will restore your faith in justice. I'm sitting in my modest two-bedroom apartment, surrounded by photo albums filled with pictures I collected in secret. Photos of graduations. I wasn't invited to birthday parties. I never attended school plays. I watched from the parking lot. This is what 13 years of heartbreak looks like when your own flesh and blood becomes a stranger. 23 years ago, I started Sparkle Solutions in my garage. My husband had just died in a construction accident, leaving me with a 15-year-old son and $17 in my checking account. I mixed cleaning solutions on my kitchen table, sold them door to door in neighborhoods where people looked at me like I was bothering them. Some days I made $5. Some days I made nothing. But I never stopped believing that hard work would give Marcus the life his father never got to see. By the time Marcus graduated high school, Sparkle Solutions had grown into a real business. I was supplying cleaning products to 3 hotels and a dozen office buildings. Marcus earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, and I cried the day he left for college, not from sadness, but from pure pride. My boy was going to be somebody important. That's where he met Stephanie Walsh, a pre-med student from Connecticut, whose family owned a chain of dental practices. When Marcus brought her home for Thanksgiving, his junior year, I was so excited to meet the girl who made my son's eyes light up. I spent 3 days cooking, bought new curtains for the living room, even got my hair done at the salon instead of cutting it myself. Stephanie was beautiful, I'll give her that. Tall blonde with the kind of confidence that comes from never worrying about money. She complimented my cooking, admired my small house, asked polite questions about my business. But there was something in her eyes when she looked around my home, something that made me feel like she was taking inventory of everything I lacked. During dinner, she mentioned how quaint it was that I still lived in the same neighborhood where Marcus grew up. When I mentioned expanding my business to Chicago, she smiled and said how wonderful it was that I had such realistic dreams. Every compliment felt like a gentle slap, wrapped in silk, but stinging just the same. The wedding planning started 2 years later, and that's when I learned what Stephanie really thought of me. She insisted on getting married at the country club, where her family held membership, a place where the valet parking cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. When she asked me to contribute to the wedding expenses, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated my entire savings account and took out a second mortgage on my house to give them $18,000. The wedding day itself was a masterpiece of humiliation, disguised as family celebration. Stephanie's family treated me like hired help at my own son's reception. Her mother, Patricia Walsh, introduced me to guests as Marcus's mother, the one with the little cleaning business. When I tried to join conversations, they would smile politely and change the subject to people and places I'd never heard of. I'll never forget overhearing Patricia talking to her sister by the champagne fountain. "Poor Marcus," she said, sipping from a crystal flute that probably cost more than my dress. "He's such a catch, but he's stuck with that woman as his mother-in-law for the rest of his life. Stephanie will just have to manage the situation carefully." I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes, but I came back with my head held high. I danced with my son, smiled in every photo, and acted like I belonged in that room, full of people who clearly thought I didn't. Marcus was happy, and that's all that mattered to me. But things started changing immediately after the honeymoon. Marcus's weekly phone calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I asked to visit their new apartment in downtown Chicago, there was always an excuse. Stephanie was studying for medical boards. They were renovating. The building had strict guest policies. I started to feel like I was begging for crumbs of my own son's attention. Stephanie had a gift for making her manipulation sound like consideration. "Marcus, your mother keeps calling during my study time," she'd say when he was on speakerphone with me. "I know she means well, but the stress is really affecting my concentration." Or, "I feel so guilty that we can't visit her more often, but you know how uncomfortable her neighborhood makes me feel." Each conversation became shorter, more strained. Marcus started sounding distracted when we talked, like he had somewhere more important to be. The boy who used to call me every night from college to tell me about his classes was disappearing, replaced by a stranger who acted like spending time with his mother was a chore. The complete cutoff happened gradually, then all at once. Marcus's calls became quarterly, then just Christmas and my birthday. When Stephanie got pregnant with their first child, I learned about it through a voicemail message that sounded like a business announcement. "Hi, Gloria. This is Stephanie. We wanted to let you know we're expecting a baby in March. The doctor says everything looks good. We'll call you after the birth." I called back immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. I wanted to know about doctor appointments, baby names, nursery colors, all the things grandmothers are supposed to be excited about. The call went straight to voicemail. I left 3 messages that week. None were returned. When Emma was born, I drove to the hospital with a car full of gifts and flowers. The nurse at the front desk told me that only people on the approved visitor list could go upstairs. My name wasn't on it. I sat in that hospital parking lot for 4 hours, watching other grandparents walk in with balloons and teddy bears, while I waited for someone to call and tell me I could meet my first grandchild. The call never came. I found out Emma's full name from the birth announcement in the newspaper 3 weeks later. The birthday cards I sent were returned unopened. The Christmas presents I mailed came back with Return to sender, written across the labels in Stephanie's perfect handwriting. I discovered through Facebook that they'd had a second child, a boy named Tyler, when a mutual friend from Marcus's high school congratulated me on becoming a grandmother again. I learned about it 6 months after he was born. I hired a private investigator just to confirm they were alive and healthy. I needed to know my grandchildren were safe, even if I couldn't be part of their lives. The PI sent me photos from a distance. Emma starting kindergarten, Tyler taking his first steps in the park, family vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. I kept those photos in a secret album, the only connection I had to the babies I'd never held. When I tried to make surprise visits to their upscale apartment building on Lakeshore Drive, the doorman had clear instructions. "I'm sorry, Mom, but the residents have requested that you not be allowed upstairs." I sent letters through colleagues at Marcus's law firm, hoping someone would deliver them. Instead, I received a certified letter from their attorney threatening a restraining order if I continued what they called harassment. My business became my refuge. I threw myself into Sparkle Solutions with the desperate energy of someone trying to outrun grief. I signed contracts with major hotel chains, expanded into 3 states, worked 16-hour days until exhaustion made the pain manageable. The company that started in my garage was becoming an empire. But what good was success when you had no family to share it with? I watched my grandchildren grow up through social media accounts I accessed with fake names. Stephanie posted constantly about family life, but her version of reality was carefully edited. Every photo included her own mother, Patricia teaching Emma piano or taking Tyler to baseball games. The captions were salt in my wounds, so grateful for family support, and Tyler's amazing grandmother taught him chess today. I didn't exist in their story. Stephanie had created a perfect narrative where Marcus had only one parent who mattered, and I wasn't her. The buyout offer came on a Tuesday morning in September. Richardson Industries, a national corporation that specialized in commercial cleaning supplies, had been watching Sparkle Solutions for 2 years. Their representative, a sharp woman in her 40s, sat in my office and offered $38 million for my company. I stared at the number written on the contract, hardly believing it was real. $38 million for something I'd started with dish soap and determination in my garage. The woman explained that Richardson wanted my distribution networks, my client relationships, and my formulations. They were offering me the choice to stay on as a consultant or walk away completely. My first instinct was to say no. Sparkle Solutions wasn't just my business. It was my identity. Without it, who was I? A lonely woman in her 60s with no family and too much time to think about everything she'd lost. But then I remembered something the private investigator had shown me photos of Tyler's Little League games, where the other grandparents cheered from the stands, while I wasn't even allowed to know which team he played for. I spent 6 months in negotiations, making sure every detail was perfect. I insisted on retaining 5% equity and consulting rights, partly because I couldn't completely let go, and partly because I wanted some ongoing connection to the company I'd built from nothing. When we signed the final papers, the lawyers shook my hand and congratulated me on my success. I smiled and thanked them, but all I could think about was the family who wouldn't be there to celebrate with me. The local newspaper ran a story about the sale. Local woman's cleaning empire sells for record amount. They interviewed me about building a business as a single mother, overcoming tragedy, and achieving the American dream. I gave them all the right quotes about hard work and perseverance, but I didn't mention the cost. Success means nothing when you have no one to share it with. With my newfound wealth, I bought a 12,000 square foot mansion in Riverside Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in the area. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a swimming pool, and a backyard big enough for tire swings and soccer games. I furnished the extra bedrooms with bunk beds and toy chests, still hoping that someday my grandchildren might visit. The irony wasn't lost on me. I finally had a house big enough for the family that wouldn't come. The day after the newspaper story was published, I was unpacking china in my new dining room when the doorbell rang. I expected a delivery truck, or maybe a neighbor with a welcome gift. Instead, I opened the door to find Stephanie Walsh standing on my marble front steps with a designer suitcase in each hand and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her stood Marcus, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze, with Emma and Tyler flanking him like confused bookends. The children stared at me with the blank curiosity of kids meeting a stranger, which, after 13 years, is exactly what I was to them. "Gloria!" Stephanie exclaimed, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We've missed you so much. I was just telling the kids how wonderful it would be to reconnect with their grandmother." I stood in my doorway, processing the surreal scene before me. 13 years of silence, and now, here they were, uninvited, but acting like this was a long overdue family reunion. Stephanie's transformation was remarkable. The woman who once had me banned from a hospital was now beaming at me like we were old friends. "Our apartment lease is ending," Stephanie announced, pushing past me into my foyer without waiting for an invitation. "And you know how impossible the rental market is right now? We thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could stay here temporarily while we look for a new place? The children need stability during this transition." Marcus finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was a mixture of shame and desperation that broke my heart. My son, now 38 years old, successful and respected in his law firm, looked like a little boy who'd been caught in a lie he could no longer maintain. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. Those 2 words carried the weight of 13 lost years. Emma, now 13, and the spitting image of her father at that age, looked around my marble entryway with wide eyes. "Who is this lady, Mom?" she asked Stephanie with the innocent confusion of a child who'd been fed lies her entire life. Tyler, 10 years old, with Marcus's dark hair and serious expression, was more direct. "Why does she live in such a big house?" he asked, staring at the crystal chandelier above our heads. Stephanie knelt down to the children's level with practiced maternal grace. "This is Daddy's mommy," she explained, her voice sweet as honey. "We just found each other again after being apart for so long. Isn't that wonderful?" The knife twisted deeper. Found each other again. As if I'd been hiding, instead of being systematically erased from their lives. I invited them into the living room, my mind racing to process this sudden reversal. Stephanie made herself comfortable on my white leather sofa, her eyes cataloguing every expensive detail of my new home. She complimented the decor, admired the view of my landscaped backyard, and asked thoughtful questions about my retirement plans now that I'd sold the business. "Gloria, this house is absolutely stunning," she gushed, accepting the coffee I served on my best china. "It must get lonely, though, rattling around in all this space by yourself. Emma, honey, look at this beautiful staircase. I bet you'd love to have a bedroom upstairs." Emma perked up with interest. "Can we see the upstairs, Grandma?" The word hit me like a physical blow. Grandma. She called me Grandma like it was natural, like we'd had a relationship all along, instead of 13 years of enforced separation. Tyler was examining my business awards displayed on the mantelpiece. "Did you really start your company in a garage?" he asked, genuinely curious. When I nodded, his face lit up with fascination. "That's so cool. Mom never told us you had a business." Stephanie's smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh, I'm sure I mentioned it," she said quickly. "There's so much family history to catch up on." As we talked, I watched my grandchildren with hungry eyes, memorizing their faces, their voices, their mannerisms. Emma had Marcus's thoughtful way of tilting her head when she listened. Tyler had inherited my own stubborn chin and direct gaze. They were beautiful, intelligent children who should have known their grandmother their entire lives, instead of meeting her as a stranger in a mansion. But I also watched Stephanie, and what I saw was a woman whose desperation was barely hidden behind her polished facade. She kept steering the conversation toward my wonderful new home and how perfect it would be for family gatherings. She mentioned Emma's expensive private school tuition and Tyler's travel baseball team costs, with the casual entitlement of someone who expected those problems to become mine. That evening, after I'd fed them dinner and shown them around the house, Marcus found me alone in the kitchen while Stephanie supervised the children in the backyard pool. For the first time in 13 years, we were alone together without his wife's watchful presence. "Mom," he started, then stopped, his hands shaking as he gripped the marble countertop. "I need to tell you something that I should have said years ago." I waited, my heart pounding, afraid to hope, but unable to stop myself. "Stephanie threatened to divorce me and take the kids if I didn't cut contact with you." He said the words, tumbling out like a confession he'd been holding back for years. She said, "Your lifestyle and values were incompatible with the kind of family she wanted to raise. She convinced me that you didn't really want to see us, that you were just being polite." The truth hit me like cold water. "Marcus, I tried to visit you in the hospital when Emma was born. They wouldn't let me upstairs." His face crumpled. "She told me you never came. She said you sent a card, but couldn't be bothered to visit." He covered his face with his hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been such a coward. I let her control everything because I was terrified of losing my children." I reached across the counter and took his hands in mine. They were the same hands I'd bandaged after playground falls, the same hands I'd taught to tie shoes and throw baseballs. My little boy, lost for so long, was finally finding his way home. "I sent birthday cards every year," I told him. "Christmas presents. They all came back unopened." "She told me you'd stopped sending things because you'd moved on with your life," he whispered. "She said successful businesswomen like you didn't have time for family obligations." We stood there in my kitchen, 13 years of lies crumbling between us. Marcus cried for the first time since his father's funeral, and I held my son while he grieved for all the time we'd lost. Meanwhile, in the backyard, Stephanie was sizing up my property like she was already planning the redecorating. I could see her through the window, pointing out features to the children, measuring spaces with her eyes, calculating square footage and property values. When the family gathered back in the living room, Stephanie's mask slipped a little more. Her hints became suggestions, then requests, then barely disguised demands. "You know, Gloria, we could really help you maintain this place," she said, settling back into my sofa like she belonged there. "It's such a responsibility for one person. If we moved in temporarily, we could share the upkeep costs and make sure you're not lonely." She painted a picture of cozy family dinners, holiday celebrations, grandchildren filling the empty rooms with laughter. Everything I'd dreamed of for 13 years, offered by the woman who'd stolen it from me in the first place. But I was 62 years old, and I'd learned something about people during my years of building a business from nothing. Desperation makes people reveal their true nature. Stephanie wasn't offering me a family reunion. She was offering me a chance to subsidize the lifestyle my son's salary couldn't maintain, while she continued controlling access to my grandchildren. "We'd only stay until we found the perfect house," she continued. "Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough for the children to really bond with their grandmother." The implied threat was subtle, but clear play, along or lose them again. I called a family meeting the next morning in my formal dining room. I'd spent the night thinking, planning, preparing for the most important conversation of my life. The mahogany table that had seemed too big for one person suddenly felt perfect for the 4 people who would determine whether my remaining years would be filled with genuine family love or continued manipulation. I started with Emma and Tyler, speaking directly to my grandchildren with the honesty they deserved. "I want you both to know that I have loved you from the moment you were born," I told them, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I have a photo album upstairs filled with pictures of your school plays, sports games, your birthday parties. I watched from a distance because I wasn't allowed to be close, but I never stopped caring about you." Emma looked confused. "Why weren't you allowed to be close?" Before Stephanie could answer, I continued. "Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt other people, even when they think they're protecting their family. I hope we can start building a real relationship now, based on honesty and love." Tyler piped up. with 10-year-old directness. Were you really not allowed at my Little League games? Because Billy's grandma comes to every game and brings snacks. I wasn't allowed, I confirmed, watching Stephanie's face tighten. But I hope to attend many games in the future if you'd like me there. Then I turned to Marcus. Son, I forgive you for the choices you made. I understand you thought you were protecting your family. But going forward, our relationship has to be built on truth, not fear. I want you to visit me regularly, but initially, I need you to come alone so we can rebuild the trust we lost. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. I want that too, Mom, more than anything. Finally, I looked at Stephanie. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. All night, the confrontation that would determine the terms of any future relationship. Stephanie, I know exactly what happened over the past 13 years, I said calmly. I have copies of every birthday card you returned, every Christmas present you sent back, every letter you refused to let Marcus read. I know about the lies you told him about my hospital visits and my attempts to be part of this family. Her practiced smile finally disappeared completely. Gloria, I think you're misremembering. I'm not misremembering anything, I interrupted. I have documentation of everything, including the restraining order threat when I tried to visit my grandchildren. Marcus looked at his wife with growing horror. Stephanie, is this true? The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandfather clock. Emma and Tyler sensed the adult tension, but didn't understand its source. Stephanie's mask was completely gone now, replaced by the calculating expression I remembered from their wedding day. I was protecting our family, she said defensively. Your mother's lifestyle and values. My lifestyle and values. I stood up, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself. I would not let her make me lose my dignity. You mean my working-class background, my small house, my self-made success that wasn't good enough for your country club friends. You have to understand, Gloria, we were building a life in a very specific social circle. By erasing me completely, I finished. By convincing my son that his mother didn't love him. By stealing 13 years of my grandchildren's lives. Tyler looked scared. Are you guys fighting? I immediately softened my voice. We're having an adult conversation about some mistakes that were made in the past, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to talk about difficult things so we can make better choices going forward. Then, I laid out my terms, speaking with the authority I'd learned from decades of business negotiations. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. Emma and Tyler, you are welcome in this house anytime. I want to know you, and I hope you'll want to know me. We have 13 years to make up for, and I plan to be the best grandmother I can be. The children smiled, relieved that the focus was back on positive things. Marcus, you are always welcome here, but for the first few months, I need you to visit without Stephanie. We need to rebuild our relationship away from the influences that damaged it. My son nodded eagerly. I understand, Mom. I want that too. And Stephanie, I turned to face her directly. You are not welcome in this house until you can offer a sincere apology for your behavior and demonstrate real changes in how you treat me and my relationship with this family. Her face flushed red. You can't just exclude me from From my own home, yes. I absolutely can. I smiled pleasantly. As for your housing situation, I suggest you contact a real estate agent. This mansion is not available as temporary lodging for people who spent 13 years treating me like I was toxic. Marcus looked mortified. Stephanie, we need to talk privately. But I wasn't finished. There will be no financial assistance for private school tuition or travel baseball until I see evidence of genuine respect and changed behavior. However, I will be setting up college funds for Emma and Tyler, managed by trustees, who will ensure the money is used appropriately for their education. Emma perked up. Does this mean you'll really come to my school play next month? I wouldn't miss it for the world, I promised her. If you want me there. Tyler was more practical. Can we still swim in your pool if Mom can't come over? Absolutely. Your dad can bring you anytime. Stephanie's face was a portrait of frustrated rage. Her carefully orchestrated plan to move into my mansion and access my fortune was crumbling, and she knew it. Worse, her children were bonding with me right in front of her, choosing the grandmother they'd never known over the manipulative mother they'd always known. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted in front of my own children. No one's insulting you, I replied calmly. I'm simply setting boundaries for healthy relationships going forward. She gathered her purses and stood up abruptly. Marcus, we're leaving. Now. But Marcus didn't move. For the first time in 13 years, my son chose his mother over his wife's manipulation. You can leave if you want to, he told her quietly. But the kids and I are staying for lunch with my mom. The power dynamic that had controlled our family for over a decade shifted in that moment. Stephanie realized she'd overplayed her hand. In her greed for my money, she'd exposed her true nature to everyone, including her own husband and children. She left alone, claiming she needed to make phone calls about our living situation. We all knew she was going to spend the afternoon trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that had slipped completely out of her grasp. After she left, the house felt lighter. Emma wanted to see the photo albums I'd kept of their milestones. Tyler asked if I would teach him about starting a business. Marcus and I talked for hours, filling in 13 years of lost conversations. That day marked the beginning of the family relationships I'd dreamed about for over a decade. Not the forced, manipulated version Stephanie had offered, but genuine connections built on honesty, respect, and love. My mansion finally became a home, not because of its size or luxury, but because it housed the authentic relationships that money can't buy and manipulation can't destroy. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting revenge on the people who hurt you. It's creating space for love to grow, despite their efforts to kill it. What started as Stephanie's calculated attempt to access my fortune became the catalyst for healing I never thought possible. Over the following months, my relationship with Marcus slowly rebuilt itself on a foundation of honesty instead of fear. He began individual therapy to address the years of emotional manipulation, and for the first time since his wedding day, he started making decisions based on his own values rather than his wife's demands. Emma and Tyler became regular visitors to my house, staying for weekend sleepovers and summer afternoons by the pool. I taught Tyler about business by letting him help me organize my home office, and he was fascinated by the invoices and contracts that had built my empire. Emma discovered that I'd saved every school newspaper, featuring her academic achievements, and every sports photo from her soccer games, even when I wasn't allowed to attend. "You really kept all of this?" she asked, flipping through albums of photos I'd collected through my private investigator and public school websites. "Even when we never saw you. Love doesn't stop just because someone builds walls around it." I told her, "I never stopped being your grandmother, even when I couldn't act like one." Stephanie's behavior became increasingly desperate as she realized her family was slipping away from her control. She tried guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and even attempting to turn the children against me by claiming I was trying to steal them from her. But children have an instinct for authentic love, and after years of being used as pawns in their mother's social climbing games, they recognized genuine care when they found it. The divorce proceedings began 6 months after that first family meeting in my dining room. Marcus had finally found the courage to admit that his marriage was built on emotional blackmail rather than love. Stephanie fought viciously for custody and alimony, but her 13-year campaign of alienation backfired spectacularly when family court counselors interviewed the children. Emma, now 14 and wise beyond her years, told the counselor, "My mom always said mean things about Grandma Gloria, but Grandma never says mean things about anyone. She just loves us and wants to know about our lives." Tyler was even more direct. "I like staying at Grandma's house because she doesn't yell at Dad or make him sad all the time." The custody agreement gave Marcus primary custody with joint visitation rights for Stephanie. More importantly, it included specific provisions protecting my relationship with my grandchildren, legally preventing any future attempts at alienation. I used my wealth thoughtfully, not as a weapon of revenge, but as a tool for building the family bonds that had been stolen from us. I funded Emma's art classes when she discovered a passion for painting, and I started a small scholarship program at Tyler's School for Children whose parents couldn't afford extracurricular activities. When Marcus worried about affording a house large enough for the children in his custody, I helped him with the down payment, but as a gift, with no strings attached. Stephanie eventually remarried a cardiac surgeon. She met through her medical practice someone whose income and social status satisfied her ambitions better than Marcus ever could. Her new husband came with grown children from his first marriage and country club connections that gave her the lifestyle she'd always wanted. In a twisted way, everyone got what they truly needed. She got status and wealth, while we got authentic family relationships. The profound lesson I learned through this ordeal wasn't about money or revenge or even justice. It was about the difference between love and control. Stephanie had confused controlling access to my family with protecting them, but real love creates space for relationships to grow naturally, not walls to prevent them from existing. I learned that patience and dignity are more powerful than anger and demands. For 13 years, I could have hired lawyers, made threats, or tried to fight manipulation with manipulation. Instead, I focused on building something worth having: a successful business, a secure future, and most importantly, the kind of character that my grandchildren would want to know when they finally had the freedom to choose. The mansion that once felt like an empty monument to success became a gathering place for birthday parties, holiday dinners, and ordinary Tuesday evenings when my son wanted to stop by after work and my grandchildren wanted to do homework at my kitchen table. The bedrooms I'd furnished with hope finally filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the conversations I'd dreamed about for over a decade. Now, when I look at the photo albums on my coffee table, they're filled with recent pictures: Emma's art show opening Tyler's baseball championship, Marcus and me working together in my garden. The painful collection of secret surveillance photos has been replaced by memories we created together, moments no one can take away, because they're built on truth and choice rather than manipulation and control. Sometimes people ask me if I'm bitter about the lost years, the missed milestones, the grandparent experiences I can never recover. The honest answer is that grief and gratitude can coexist in the same heart. I grieve for the little girl who took her first steps without me cheering, and the little boy who lost his first tooth while I was banned from his life. But I'm grateful beyond measure for the second chance we've been given to love each other without barriers. The most beautiful part of our story isn't the mansion or the money or even the satisfaction of watching Stephanie's schemes backfire. It's the ordinary magic of Tyler calling me from school to tell me about his science project, or Emma texting me photos of sunsets that remind her of my garden. It's Marcus stopping by on Sunday mornings just to talk, and the 3 generations of family gathered around my dining room table, building memories that no one can steal or manipulate or take away. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or square footage or business valuations. It's measured in the freedom to love your family openly, the security that comes from relationships built on honesty, and the peace of knowing that authentic connections will always triumph over artificial control, even when it takes 13 years for justice to find its way home. Have you ever had to fight for a relationship with someone you love? Have you experienced the pain of family manipulation or the joy of reconnecting after years of separation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. And share this video with anyone who needs to hear that love is stronger than manipulation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that it's never too late for truth to heal the wounds that lies have created. Until next time, keep believing in the power of authentic family love.